Hello, what's going on, folks? It is the Daily Destroyer, Week 17 DFS show, part of the Dynasty Warzone Network. As always, here with Lou, I am Tyler. This is our final show. We will not be doing Week 18, so this is the last chance to get the DFS in here with the Dynasty Warzone with Lou and myself. You know, if you are not in the championship matchup, we really hope you are, but if you're not, you can still get some football action in by playing those DFS lineups. Really interesting week this week on the main slate on DraftKings. As always, let's start off with the quarterback position, Lou. You know, and I think I've seen this about everywhere I've looked. My numbers, it just seems like the chalk this week and the best play this week is going to be Jared Goff, which is funny to say out loud. But at 5,600 in a pretty high total game against a pretty soft matchup, and Jared Goff's been playing quite well at home, and everything just seems to be adding up to where we're playing Jared Goff in cash, and that kind of just seems to be the direction folks are going. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he's just underpriced. 5,600. I feel like he's had a good enough year that he should be like 6,200 or something like that. He keeps doing it, facing the Bears at home, so it's not like they're out in the cold in Chicago.
We're checking the boxes here for things that need to happen for Jared Goff to do well.
Yeah. So I just think the way the Lions have been playing recently, they have gone a little more towards passing for especially touchdowns. Earlier on in the season, it was Jamal Williams getting 2 rushing touchdowns each game and then 1 for Swift. And now it seems like the 300 yards and 3 touchdown games for Goff seem a lot more likely at this point in the season. And the only concern I have, maybe, I don't know if you have this concern, but will Chicago stay competitive all game? We did see the last 2 times these teams faced each other. It was a lot of fantasy goodness on both sides. I think Justin Herbert, or I should say Justin Fields, sorry, 7,900, a little more expensive.
A little more expensive than we'd like to see.
His basically his best game of the season came against the Lions. Like, he's probably just going to score a 60-yard rushing touchdown this week again. He's going for that record. He's a little farther away from last week with only getting 11 rushing yards. But, yeah, I think 100 yards rushing is in play for him. But price tag in cash is probably too high.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think Goff is the guy. He's had 3 of his last 4 games. He has at least 24 fantasy points on DraftKings. So, for me, like, I think 20 is a pretty safe expectation for him. And for 5,600, it's just pretty good savings right there.
Yep. I mean, it's an easy week to pay down at quarterback. You don't need to pay up, really. I mean, there really isn't a lot to pay up for being completely honest here. Because you can go to Mahomes at 85, but Denver's traditionally a tough matchup. Fields is 79, and then, like, what is it, like Herbert at 71? Like, I don't really have interest in any of these guys. So I'm pretty much only looking at guys in this, like, 5,500 to 6K range. A couple of other guys just throw out there that I have some interest in. Aaron Rodgers, he's playing the Vikings. I believe that the Green Bay Packers are eliminated from playoff contention. Not that I necessarily would bet that the Packers are making the playoffs, but they are eliminated if they lose this game against the Vikings. So I expect Aaron Rodgers to bring it. 6K is not a bad price whatsoever. And then I also like Minshew. Minshew's coming out pretty favorably in my projections. He balled out last week. 55K. We know the Saints defense is solid, but I'm not necessarily too worried about it. There's just a lot of weapons for the Eagles who they need to win this game. I mean, the Eagles need to win to clinch the bye.
Yeah.
So I expect them to really try to keep things going, keep their foot on the gas. Maybe that means Gardner Minshew. We know he's capable of it. He's at 55. So those are 2 other names that I've found myself going to. If I'm not going to Goff, I'm probably going to end up going with Goff. But just for the sake of talking about other QBs, there is some interest in Aaron Rodgers and Gardner Minshew from my side of things.
Yeah, and I think this week specifically, with Goff is going to have a lot of the ownership, and then maybe people go to Rodgers, but Rodgers only has 1 game with 20 fantasy points this year. Gardner Minshew, Brock Purdy, right next to Goff, each have done that, and they've played a lot less games than Rodgers. So the beauty of it is you have pivots around Goff, which is going to be pretty useful when it comes to tournaments. But what's your thought on Mike White? He's also 5,400 facing Seattle, which Seattle's had a decent amount of shootouts. Both these teams are trying to win. They're both
Agreed.
on the cusp. So this could be a high competitive game.
Yeah, the
Either
total's
that
low.
or the other side. Geno
So the
Smith.
total's low. The total's at 42.5. I kind of like the over here, especially if the Seahawks can find a way to score some touchdowns.
Yeah.
I'm not really necessarily worried about the Jets scoring in this game as much as I am the Seahawks. But if for some reason the Seahawks can get some touchdowns in the first half, 2 or 3 of them, maybe 17 points or something in the first half, I do like Mike White this week. I mean, Seahawks pass defense, 21st DVOA, 22nd yards allowed per pass. I mean, it's weak, below average. I mean, they're even weaker against the run. I mean, the Seahawks defense isn't good. So,
Yeah.
I do like the Mike White call. Actually, now that you kind of pointed it out, I mean, it sucks he's only $200 cheaper than Jared Goff because it's just like I think you kind of kicked it off at the beginning. It's just Jared Goff's kind of mispriced it. I'm like, oh, I do like Mike White, but it's like I'm only saving $200 to go from Jared White
Probably not in cash.
Jared Goff
with
to
that
Mike
total.
White. Yeah, but there is some interest there. I mean,
play in
David.
a
How
min-priced-
about
yeah.
how about David Blau 4K?
Man, 4K and against Atlanta is somewhat enticing. It's just
And I've
I
watched
don't know.
David Blau go 200, 280, and 2 tutties before on Thanksgiving with the Lions.
got Hopkins.
He's not sexy, but he's not bad.
Yeah.
I trust him to throw the ball to his most talented players and go from there, and it's a soft matchup. So I mean, I don't hate the David Blau conversation at least.
I don't love playing 4K running backs that don't really have a rushing floor.
Gotcha.
That's my one concern with
Kill
it.
quarterbacks, yeah.
And I don't know. I guess it depends on what you're getting with the extra 1,500 dropping off of that range we were just talking about. But it's just another reason like you don't have to go all the way up to Fields or Mahomes this week.
Mm-hmm.
But that means they're going to come in lower owned, and we know they probably have the highest ceilings on the slate. Like Fields can put up 45 points again in this matchup. Mahomes, last time they faced the Broncos, another guy in that range, Russ Wilson, had his best game against the Chiefs. Maybe the game gets out of hand again, and you might need one of the two sides. But I think if that game were to get out of hand, you probably would rather have Wilson.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's the only reason it got out of hand. So,
pool of quarterbacks. Give me 3, Lou, and if one of them has not been talked about, let's hit it.
Jared Goff, Justin Fields, and Gardner Minshew.
Gardner Minshew. Shifting to the running back position, a lot of interesting plays. There's also some really expensive ones that I tend to like just because they're in great spots, and they're pretty nicely priced. I guess I'll start things off here. I don't have actually much interest in Christian McCaffrey this week, sitting at 9K. I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. I think the big thing is I expect this game to get just out of hand. I don't think that Jared Stidham is going to be able to put up many points and get many yards against the San Francisco Niners defense, like one of the best defense in the league. The Raiders aren't going to score. Raiders defense isn't good. I don't think they're going to be able to stop the 49ers. I could see this game getting out of hand rather quickly, right? And if this game gets out of hand rather quickly, we have seen the 49ers have a tendency to kind of ease Christian McCaffrey's workload, right? And I think there's another piece of this too. The 49ers, I believe, are playing in a 4 p.m. game. So they're on the later part of this. If the Eagles win, they lock in the bye, which means that the 49ers essentially are playing for the second or third seed. They can't get the bye. If the Eagles win in the 1 o'clock, 49ers can't get the bye. So it's like they don't necessarily have a ton on the line, right? So if this game is out of hand early against a Jared Stidham-led Raiders team and they can't get the bye, why are they going to run Christian McCaffrey, in the late third, fourth quarter when they can just rest him because they know they're going to the playoffs? So, I think that Christian McCaffrey's a fine, floor play, but at 9K, like in your season-long leagues, like I'm not going to bench him, but I'm just saying to pay 9K price with like the environment and the situation that's going on, I just have a really hard time being able to click that 9K button on CMC this week.
Yeah, I think part of the issue comes to he's likely not going to get passing as many receptions as these other games that are going to be more competitive. I have similar concerns for him because it's one of those things, right, where if the first touchdown or two go to say like George Kittle, then CMC at that price is going to be a dud in your lineup.
Yes,
So
especially if they're up a couple touchdowns, then they might
yeah,
just start sprinkling in TDP or Jordan Mason because why not?
right. And we have seen them bring in Jordan Mason a lot. Um, I think when it comes to McCaffrey, like the matchup is great. Like he could definitely hit that ceiling if they're up, 35-7 or something. He probably at least was two of the touchdowns early on. So it really depends on if it's one of those things where how early does they ease him out of it? How early do they bring in Jordan Mason? And I think when you have someone like McCaffrey who does have some history of these injuries, when you're close to the playoffs here, and as you mentioned, like they might already know that they can't get the 1 seed, then there's not really a reason. So I think that's a little of the risk. He's going to be heavily owned. He could easily put up 30 plus fantasy points any given week, but I think if he's going to be that owned, it might be worth it to go after someone else who is going to have less ownership and potentially higher floor because of that matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you, and I think like at the top here, let's just keep it kind of similar to in this range. While I do have an issue, with CMC at 9K, I'm probably not playing Eckler at 85K. I'm not going to dive too deep into this with you, Lou, but the Chargers have already locked up the wild card, and they can't improve their lot. So it's just like in this game, the Rams are playing for nothing. The Chargers are playing for nothing. I don't see a big reason here that they're just going to like pound Eckler around. Like he's a fine play, but like the ceiling is a bit of concern here for me. So I think like when I look at the top here, CMC Eckler, I don't have much interest. I do have interest, however, in Saquon Barkley at 8K if I am going to be paying up a bit. Yeah, the Colts run defense is pretty solid. I'd say it's a little bit above average, but it really just comes down to the fact that the Colts are not going to score that many points. Like regardless of the Giants defense, a Nick Foles led offense without Jonathan Taylor, it's just not happening. We saw it. Things
They
are not
are
going to
more
go
of a
well.
run funnel too.
Yeah.
So,
A bit more, and it's just, and you add in the fact that Saquon's also just been playing really well as of late. So the Giants are home favorite. I believe almost a touchdown favorite here. So it's just that things are really, and Saquon's been hot. He's just the kind of guy you want in your cash lineup because we know he's going to be that workhorse. He's going to get that volume through the air and on the ground and on the goal line. He just gets everything that you want from a running back. So, if I'm paying up, I'm missing CMC, I'm missing Eckler, but I'm perfectly fine getting to Saquon and paying down at quarterback this week. I'm not having much trouble getting Saquon in those lineups.
yeah, I think for 1,000 less than McCaffrey, I don't necessarily think he has a much different of an expectation in that matchup. Like Giants want to win, and
They need to win.
They
They need to win.
go through Barkley.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones might struggle against that Indy pass defense, so they might lean on the run a little more this week. So yeah, I think he's my favorite on the upper end, even the 7K and up. But yeah, I agree with you on Barkley there.
And then just to kind of keep going, kind of down the list, names that kind of pop up to me if we're looking at it, from highest price to lowest price. I mean, James Conner's got to stick out at 7,200. He's been an absolute legit workhorse. I mean, we're talking like 95+% of the snaps. We just talked about David Blau coming in. It seems like, and then they're playing the Atlanta Falcons, right? Neither one of these teams are playing for much right now. So take that for what you will. But I mean, the Cardinals don't really have much going on. It's just, why not just hand the ball off to Connor 18 to 20 times? Why not Blau just check the ball down to Connor 5 or 6 times? Hopkins seems to have an injured knee. It just sets up really well for there to be a ton of work. And the offense leaning upon the Cardinals is a pretty easy narrative for me to play. So I go down the list, like obviously like Saquon, but even at 72, maybe it's a little more expensive than I wanted, but with the workload and the matchup, I don't know, man. James Conner's name that at least pops to me.
Yeah, I think he's fine. Like the question is, how is that offense going to run with Blau? Is it going to be? Are the Falcons just going to know, like, oh, they might lean on Connor more, and that could be somewhat of a concern. I don't know if the Falcons defense is good enough to really like shut down someone like Connor, but that's just a concern I'd have. But 7,200, I mean, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think he's that much of a better play than Stevenson. Like you say a lot of the same
Or
things
Etienne.
from
Or
Ramondre.
Etienne.
Yeah. So
That's what,
like
those are the next two I was going to get to is Ramondre Etienne. I'll turn it
yeah,
over to you here.
for me, I think Connor would be my fourth of those. Stevenson still under 7K. I don't even get it. Like he just keeps putting up 20 fantasy points each week in PPR scoring. So like I don't understand how DK is pricing him under 7K still. Uh, Facing Miami. We know Patriots and Dolphins have some competitive games every single time they go out.
Yep.
Against Bridgewater, they might lean on the run a little more.
Yep. I mean, this
Damian
game,
Harris might be back.
he is. He's off the injury report, yeah.
So that might take away some of the workload of Stevenson, but we've seen it when Harris has played in the last
And it's the
few
pass
times.
work. It's the pass work we like for Stevenson. We know Harris isn't taking that.
Yeah. And against the Dolphins, like they could be trailing. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is a reasonable backup. We've seen him have decent games in place of Tua. So I think I lean Stevenson over Connor right now. You say
That's fair
400
with the price, and then Etienne. I mean, I think the only concern here with Jacksonville is they're not playing for anything, right? This game doesn't matter. It's all about Week 18 for them against the Titans. So this game is meaningless. But however, Doug Peterson, head coach, has come out and said like he's not resting his starters. He doesn't do that. So they're playing against Houston. I think we've talked about this enough on the show at this point in time, but the Texans' run defense is one of the worst in the league. It's pretty much just free money. 28th in yards allowed per carry, 24th DVOA. Etienne, has been a workhorse most of the time this year when things finally got going his way. So I see him at 6,400. And I just think to myself, like it seems right. The matchup, the price, the workload, the opportunity. Thoughts on Etienne?
Yeah, he's another one that just every running back against the Texans just goes off. So it's one of those things where even if he only gets, let's say, like 12 to 15 carries, he could probably still get 100 yards with that Texas defense. They just give up all these chunk plays.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, it was, 125 or so to Henry, and we know he had 200 the last few times he played them. So it's where they struggle most. I agree with you on Jags. It almost doesn't matter what happens this game because next week is the one that really matters for the division. But I don't know. They're a young team. Like I think they're going to play them normally.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at the end of the fourth quarter, they change things up. But I mean, the way Lawrence has been playing, the way this whole offense has been running the last few weeks, I think they're just going to try to keep that momentum going so that they can have it into the playoffs.
Moving down, I wanted to touch on probably one of my favorite plays of the week, and that's going to be Tyler Algier.
Oh.
Been waiting for that for a while. He was like probably it wasn't like my favorite prospect, but I think I ranked him like number 4, number 5, I believe, for running back prospects this year. And it was kind of a little bit of disappointment, but things have been hot. I think you look at him individually, he's gone back-to-back with over 100 yards from scrimmage, just about 18 carries, 3 targets a game. He's, more importantly, he's taking work from Cordero Patterson. He's starting to kind of distance himself a little bit from Cordero Patterson, which we absolutely love to see. Cardinals are bottom 5 run defense in the NFL. Falcons also have a 23.5 point implied total this week, which is actually quite high compared to most of the teams. Yeah, so I mean, you see an implied total of 23, like you're expected to score some points. So I think Algier, just considering like, hey, like he's probably going to get 18 to 20 touches in this game. So at 5,300, he's a guy that I find myself going to, especially if I'm going to Saquon. I like to go Saquon, Algier to kind of balance things out because I think it allows me to go higher in some places. But Algier is definitely one of those guys that I find myself going to quite a bit. And I'm not going to talk too much about this, but Brian Robinson is another popular play this week because of the matchup against the Browns and Gibson being out. But like, Brian, I think there's like not as much pass work for Brian Robinson as there could be for Algier. You might get a little bit more on the ground, but I tend to lean towards Algier over Robinson. Although I do think they're both very good plays.
I think I like Robinson more. I don't know. It just with Gibson out, we can see Robinson getting 20 plus touches in this game.
Yeah, he could also get 3 or 4 targets too. It's very possible. He has no J.D. McKissick either, so.
And like the Browns have just been allowing a lot of running backs to run over them too. Um, we've seen him get pass work, so I think that adds a little bit to his floor. Algier less so, but yeah, man, Algier. Like I drafted him on best ball teams, and it was just a little too little,
Too
too
late, a
late.
little too
For
late
him.
to get going for you.
But yeah, I think those are probably the best two in that 5K range. Like I prefer them both over Zonovan Knight, DeAndre Swift's splitting time, um, even like AJ Dillon. What about Leonard Fournette? So he's 5,600. Um, we see his upside a lot because there's these games where he'll just get 6, 8 catches. So he's still part of that game plan. But how do you expect this Tampa Bay Carolina game to go? Do you think it's just going to be a slog and not much scoring? Or do you think at 5,600, Leonard Fournette, we know he has upside of 25, 30 fantasy points because of uh, the receptions that he gets in this offense with Brady. So do you have any interest in Fournette?
Um, no, not in cash. I think there's a world in tournaments I'd play him. But I don't. I mean, obviously, like we've seen him get more workload than Rashad White. Rashad White can't seem to take it. They've given Rashad White every opportunity to come in here and kind of take this job for Fournette, and I think it's a mixture of Fournette playing good enough and Rashad White not playing good enough that he's been able to hold it. I could see this game going a lot of different directions. You know, we've seen the Panthers kind of play really well and play really bad, and Tampa Bay has been bad as of late, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me in a must-win game like this, where Brady finally does turn it on. Like I've kind of gotten burned for like counting on Brady a bit this year, but
Yeah.
I think like this is the kind of game where like if Brady goes for 3 touchdowns and 300 yards, Fournette gets 7, 8 catches and a touchdown, 6 yards there, I wouldn't be surprised. So I don't know. I just think there's a lot of the range of outcomes of what this game can be and what can happen is a bit too wide in my opinion, and I just think there's better plays cheaper than Fournette. That I'll go to. If you get a lot of conviction here for Fournette Lou, I'm not going to talk you out of it. It's not a play that I necessarily don't like. It's just not where I'm going.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, he's probably more of a tournament play because you're playing for that game that he has multiple catches, 5+ catches, and if it doesn't happen because of Rashad White getting a decent amount of work now, then you could see him have a big dud here, just because game flow too. So, yeah, I agree with those points there.
I also we talked about Mike White. I feel like we got to talk about Zonovan Knight too. 51. He's cheap. Probably he's the cheapest one we've talked about, only by 100 so far. But Seahawks run defense is 25th DVOA, 25th yards allowed per carry. I mean, it's just one of those things where they can get back on track pretty easily. And if they start getting ahead in this game, and Seahawks can't move the ball against this stout Jets defense, and we could be seeing a lot of Zonovan Knight in this one. So I know the pass work is a little bit of a concern, but there's certainly some interest on my side just knowing that Mike White's back and what this offense can look like and how soft the Seahawks defense, specifically the run defense, is.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of running back plays this week, and if we're paying down at quarterback, I think I'm more likely to do something like the Etienne, Stevenson, and Barkley. So I think for the cheaper running backs, those might just be plays that I'm doing in tournaments.
Cool. Let's give me a pool of 5 running backs here, Lou, and then talk about one if we missed it.
Sure. Saquon, Etienne, Ramondre, Brian Robinson, and James Conner.
All right. Going to the wide receiver position, dude, I feel like it's like same song and dance for me almost every week. Amon-Ra St. Brown 78, still underpriced, and Garrett Wilson 55 with Mike White back. It's like I've been putting Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown in my cash lineups for like weeks upon weeks upon weeks, and it's paid off more than it hasn't. I expect both these guys to hold probably ridiculous ownership, 20-30%. Like, would not be surprised. I mean, some probably even higher, and some some double ups. I wouldn't be surprised to see these around 40%, to be honest, especially with Garrett Wilson. Anyways, Amon-Ra St. Brown 78, Garrett Wilson 55. I think Garrett Wilson's a bit more egregiously underpriced, but I feel like we're talking about cash games on DraftKings on the main slate. We got to start with these two.
Yeah, I think pretty much every week with this Garrett Wilson, decent matchup. I think the Mike White thing. I think Mike White will be less owned. So in tournaments, if you're playing Garrett Wilson, I think those are lineups you want to play with Mike White. The thing with Garrett Wilson is, at this point, like everyone knows to play him, and 5,500, he's gonna have in tournaments probably 30%. He's potentially the highest owned player on the entire slate, if not with Goff. But I think, man, Garrett Wilson just every single week, he's still underpriced. We've seen his
Egregiously
upside,
at this point.
and it's a decent matchup for him. So, yeah, I like him a lot. He's probably the favorite play, but almost like the free square in cash, so to speak, because of the price specifically. But yeah, Amon-Ra every week, he's just going to sit in that upper 7K range and be viable pretty much every week. A lot of people are playing Goff to Amon-Ra. You don't want to play that stack in tournaments. It's just going to be too owned. But if you do Goff with a different Detroit wide receiver or tight end, that could work. But
probably not tight end, but yeah, I get your point.
I think in tournaments, you almost can't play either of them, at least not together. Maybe you can play Amon-Ra and hope he gets 10 catches, 100 yards, but no touchdowns for Goff kind of thing. So those are probably my favorite two. There's a decent amount of cheap wide receiver plays this week.
Yeah.
Which we don't always get.
Before we go cheap, though, I did want to talk about Keenan Allen real quick.
Yeah.
7K. It's a fine matchup. He's just been getting stupid volume.
Like 14 targets
yeah,
a game.
Yeah. So I was just like, I'm like, 7K is not enough to chase me off of that one. So
yeah,
for me, it's like, since he's returned, like he scored like 16, 20, 20, 16, 20, like the DK points have been 16, 21, 21, 16, 24. Like it's been,
and he only has like 1-2 touchdowns in that.
He's seen 14 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. So it's just like one of those things where I'm like, maybe the Chargers get up a bit, but I think they do that with Keenan Allen if they, you know what I'm saying? Like he's just been moving the ball. So like I think there are cheap options to talk about, right? There's a lot of cheap options, and we're gonna get to those, Lou. But I also think that like there's a lot of risk baked into some of these cheaper options. And I think there's just not a lot of risk with Keenan Allen in this one because he gets so much volume that he's kind of one of those guys I've actually kind of been building that cash shell around because I'm like, all right, 7K, I'm getting double-digit targets in a game that doesn't necessarily scare me. Let's roll.
He's basically the perfect cash play, just the way that they use him in that offense. And Mike Williams is the tournament play. Like that's how you build lineups with Chargers. I do think, he's pretty safe for like 5 for 60. That's probably his floor at this point. If he gets into the end zone, see him more so. I don't think he's going to be with Amon-Ra. I think people will go there. So he might be a little underowned. So you have a way of being a little different there.
Yep.
But isn't it crazy that Devonta Smith is higher priced than him at this point?
Truly.
Yeah, I think Keenan, from like a cash standpoint, he makes a perfect cash play here. A little cheaper than the other options.
Yeah, and then I think just kind of continuing talking about some of the going to cheaper options, I guess it would kind of be the direction. I like Drake London, man. Things have been good since Ritter's been back. It's like Ritter's targeting his best player. I think over the last like 3 games, he's had like an over 50% market share of just like the yards. Like it's basically like they realize that their best option right now without Pitts out there is Drake London. So when they're throwing the ball, like let's throw it over Drake London. He's averaged over 10 targets a game since Ritter's came there. It's just like he's the first read. Target share is good. He's making 50% of the receiving yards. And at 4,900, he's just one of those where I'm like, I kind of like the price really draws me to him, and I
Yeah.
think part of it's my bias of just being a big Drake London fan coming into the season, and things really didn't work out the way I wanted it to. But it's easy to kind of come up with a story that it's not his fault now that Ritter's in there, and they really just seem to be force feeding their best player the ball. Am I playing London and Algier together? I'm not sure. Actually, I don't think it's the worst idea because their price and the implied total. But I think like one of the cheaper plays that I like that I think might not be as owned or as popular is Drake London.
Yeah, and a lot of these things, that game could be just because they're like two bad teams that have nothing to play for. Sometimes we see those games just go off.
Yeah, it's like they're just like stacking.
33 to 31 kind of games.
And dude, David Blau is not bad. Like that's the thing is like I don't think he's not a bad quarterback, and I know he's not throwing the Drake London, but the other side of the ball, it's like I think the Cardinals can score. Like I'd like the over in this game.
Yeah.
Anyways, cheap options, Lou. What else you got for me?
I think for cheap guys like Brandon Cooks is 4,800. That's always like a reasonable decision. I think you could play someone like Elijah Moore to get off of the Garrett Wilson chalk, or in that Mike White sack, you put both of them in there and hope he throws over 300 yards and they get the touchdowns. So I like Elijah Moore, 3,500, especially with Mike White back. Let's see. Like, do you have any interest in Greg Dortch? We've seen him.
I do. If Hopkins doesn't go, I'm all in on Dortch.
More so. Yeah.
If Hopkins doesn't go, I'm in on Dortch. I mean, obviously there's a lot of unknown at quarterback, but if Hopkins with a knee injury can't end up playing, I'll go Dortch at minimum 3K. Not as interested in Dortch if Hopkins is out there. I still think that Hollywood. I'm not playing Hollywood. Don't get me wrong, but I still think like between him and Hopkins, I'm not necessarily thinking there's enough left on the Blau bone here for to be too excited. I mean, it doesn't need much to get it done. So I guess if you have to punt, even if Hopkins doesn't play, I'm okay with Dortch. But just the way things are setting up for me right now with the quarterbacks and the running backs that I'm liking, I don't have to pay 3K at a wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Jacoby Myers 5K I think is reasonable against the Dolphins.
And then Curtis Samuel 44 and Dotson I think is what 46. I should have.
I like Dotson mostly. It just seems like he's has
been on a tear, man.
Touchdowns in that offense. Like Heineke looks for him when they're by that zone.
Yep, and he's been scoring touchdowns all year long, so I like him. I mean, those are pretty much the big ones for me. I think Jay Jeff's always a good play at 95 in a game that Minnesota's going to try to win, but I don't have the money for Jay Jeff at 95 if I'm playing Saquon, and I tend to want to play Saquon. So that's
I don't have too much interest in the upper guys.
No, it's just like when I say
AJ
upper,
Brown, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill are all playing with backup quarterbacks. Jefferson is like just the only one up there that I think consider because he's going for that record. They're going to try to get it for him.
And against the Packers, it's like and to keep the Packers out of the playoffs, it's you got to think the Vikings are going to want to do that.
Yeah, and so he has 224 yards, I believe it is, to get to 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 160 or something to get the record in a single season. Man, I mean, how crazy would it be? Just a lot of people, the hate towards it is, oh, well, it's 17 games now, and Calvin did it in 16.
Yeah,
I think that is another thing that they might be looking to get him that record this week to
show that, like, yeah, he still did it.
It's crazy because he started the year with what? It was 11 or 14 yards in week 3. So he's just been on a tear. He's a good play every single week. He might get more ownership because of the other high-priced guys aren't all that interesting this week. So that's one downside to it. Like you're not going to be sneaky to play him.
And I just got news here. Hopkins is out on Sunday.
Officially out.
So Dortch at 3K is in. Dortch at 3K is officially in, man.
And Marquise Brown was still limited last week. So not sure, man. That game could go two ways. It could just be gross, and there's no scoring, and it's like 10-6 or something, or just it's the highest scoring game of the week. I feel like there's no in between for that game. But yeah, there's so many backups in there. It's hard for me to really trust them. But George,
And I
yeah,
mean,
he's just been priced.
yeah. Any other running back, wide receivers you want to talk about before we go to the pool?
Um, Lockett's supposed to be back,
I'm not doing
or
it with a
else I would have
broken hand,
done
man.
Metcalf.
Yeah,
No, but I was saying I would have been more
Metcalf. Yeah.
interested in Metcalf. Chris Godwin is a reasonable play in cash every week, so just keep him in the pool if you're around that price. Um, but no, I think like a lot of these guys, we've seen it before. Like Christian Watson could be the guy you want in those Rodgers teams. He's probably by far my favorite to stack there. But outside of that, I think a lot of them are just either in play or we've already talked about them.
All right, pool of 5 wide receivers.
Sure. From top, I'll do Jefferson, Amon-Ra, Keenan, Garrett Wilson, and let's go Dortch now.
Got to go Dortch now. I feel the same way, man. It's like it's gonna be so high end. Anyways, tight ends. Usually pretty gross here. I think like one of the names I think if I'm punting is going to be Jelani Woods. We saw Foles have a propensity to really target Jelani Woods last week. It was just one of those things where like, okay, he's running routes at a pretty decent clip. Not as high as we want to be at, but good enough. It's just like he's getting legitimate targets. He's getting real work, and if Foles likes him for some reason, like great. So I think like he's the punt play that makes a lot of sense for me is going to be Jelani Woods, and then Evan Ingram, man, he's just been on a tear lately. At 44, and I think if you're looking for, we know there's a ceiling there for Evan Ingram. We've seen it, which is just funny to say. Like every time I've been like I can't trust Evan Ingram, he goes off, and I'm probably not going to end up playing him. But Evan Ingram at 44 and Jelani Woods at 28, I think are two options that seem fairly strong to me.
Yeah, and I think like you don't have to pay up, but Travis Kelce is obviously in play. You know, he's 8,100. We talk about every week. I don't know if you can really like fit him in cash, but I think they're also trying to get him records in a tight end position. He is only 160 or so yards away from his own receiving record. He's only 8 catches away from his top receptions. I think the total 116 is the record, so he's kind of far.
Okay.
He needs 19 more receptions.
That's a bit. I mean, it's possible in 2 weeks, but
so I don't know. I could see them trying to go for some stuff like that, but I don't know if it's enough to try to get up to him. But yeah, I think Jelani call is pretty decent. Evan Ingram just keeps doing it, and he's honestly Evan Ingram is winning people championships in fantasy this year. I had him on a team that went to the finals. I've had him on some best ball teams that he was the guy you needed in the last couple of weeks. So I do have probably he might be my favorite play, 4,400. Might be good to save and go down to Jelani. So yeah, he's probably my number 2 there. But I mean George Kittle, man, he just keeps crushing. And
yeah, at 59 is a nice price. To know the ceiling is there.
Decent pivot off of CMC, but this could be a game that he's just blocking a lot more, unfortunately. So I don't know how interested I'll be in doing it.
So I mean, Jelani Woods, Evan Ingram. If you had him a third in that pool, who would it be?
What's your thoughts on Tyler Higbee? It seems like Baker loves him.
Yeah, I'm okay with it at 46. Honestly, like
he's a little pricier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I'm okay with it, but Baker loves him. He's getting the volume. He's like one of the best pass catchers there. It's really Higbee and Akers, and that's really all they got going for him. Yeah. So I could see it working out. I think Hunter Henry also is interesting at 3K because I think Jonnu Smith is out. So I think there could be a little bit there.
He just gave a bagel last week.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
people
concerning.
Aren't going to go back to him.
A Noah Fant without any Disley at 34. Another, it's okay. But I mean, for me, it's just kind of I'm playing probably Jelani Woods or Evan Ingram. So that's that.
I have a couple others that interest me. Dulcich is on the IR now, so Eric Saubert is been priced 2,500. Cole Kmet, man, The only time I won a GPP this season was Bears against Lions, and I had Fields to commit. Fields ran for 2 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns to commit. Basically, like the perfect
It's a perfect
situation there.
scenario, yeah.
So he's 4,500. I don't love the price, but I think if you're playing Fields lineup, he's my favorite to stack. So those are 2 other guys that I have interest in. Everyone, he can play so many of these guys. Like, what about Shane Zylstra? He's a reasonable pivot off of Amon-Ra.
He's still like splitting time. I don't know, man. I'm not doing
3
it.
touchdowns, man.
I know
If he just gets the touches around the end zone, that's almost good enough for a tight end. If he gets another 2 touchdowns here, he's the guy he'll need with Goff.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Anyways, let's go to defense special teams. It's that simple. Again, it's really what fits. There's a lot of pretty easily priced games this week. I think obviously Falcons 27 against David Blau. I know I've spoke highly of him, but still. Falcons 27, Patriots 26 against Miami and Bridgewater. Yeah. I think
49ers against Stidham is probably going to be the highest owned.
Yeah, I would say by far 49ers.
Basically the best defense in the league facing
at 29.
A backup on a team that's already given up.
So I think in cash we're just playing 49ers.
I think you play 49ers in cash, yeah. Especially we're probably, you mentioned you might be playing 3 to 4 players from that Falcons game. Then you probably don't want them as a defense because you want that game to go off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if you're paying up, Chiefs make a ton of sense every week. Giants make some sense this week. You could take the Jets. But I don't know. I'm not really trying to play against Geno just this year. That hasn't been all that great. Chargers are facing the Rams, who, they just don't really score a ton of points. But I don't think you have to pay up. I think you can stay down. Are there any like super cheap defenses that interest you? I think Saints against Minshew, it's kind of tough because Minshew, every time he plays, he looks reasonable enough. So maybe like Panthers is the cheap defense that I have most interest in. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on the like 25 and under?
25 and under crowd. No. I guess Rams maybe. I talked a little bit about how the Chargers already clinched, and maybe that game could I could paint a picture where maybe just play like Keenan or something like that, and could play the Rams. They seem to be playing like a bit more here with Mayfield there. They kind of rejuvenated the team to want to play football. But I mean, I'm just pretty set on the 49ers, so we're good to go.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much a plug and play, at least in cash. Tournaments, maybe you don't want to play them just because of ownership, but I don't know. It's hard to see them not being the best defense to play this week.
All right, man. That'll do it, man. Week 17, another season under the books. So what is this, year 3, year 4? We've been doing this, Lou. Always an absolute pleasure sitting here chopping up DraftKings main slate with you. Final thoughts here on Week 17.
Oh, good luck out there. A lot of people are in fantasy finals. There's not much going on next week. Next week is just kind of crazy with a lot of people sit. A lot of these games are just, some of them are highly competitive because like that Jags-Titans game going to be for the division. So this might be the last like truly fun week to build teams. If you're making tournament lineups, probably don't go with Goff to Amon-Ra. But there's a lot of fun, different ways you can play on this slate.
All right, man. Lou, plug your Twitter, plug the work. Final time.
Yeah, at Lucky_LouDog. Still making DraftKings Rainmakers content over for Lucky Trader.
Find me on Twitter at FFTyler. That's all we have today, folks. Don't forget, tell somebody you love them. Later.